A common practice among asbestos surveyors is to add room notes. Room notes allow you to describe the room you're in as a whole, so you add these in addition to specific items of interest, for example, samples, cross-references, and presumes. The room notes show your client you've been into a room and you've considered it, even if you haven't actually found any risks. So it's a great way to pad out your report and just show that it is complete. Just imagine for a second you didn't have room notes and you hadn't taken any samples or found any items of interest. The report might look really small or like it was missing something. So that's the advantage of recording room notes. We've made room notes optional though. I would say most people I speak to add room notes, although there is the occasional one who doesn't, which is why we've made it optional. Now, in our system, when you're adding a new inspection item, you're going to have the option of inspect location or inspect item. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to add a new record here, and you can see location here on the left hand side is what you want to be thinking of as your room notes. Item is an item of interest within that room. So for example, your samples, cross-references, and so on. We've called it location because technically you could add notes to a level or also to a building itself. So for example, if I just filled in the building and put some notes, I'm describing the building. If I put the level as well, I'm describing the level. And if I put the location in, I'm describing this location. So most of the time you're going to be describing a location, and you can just think of location as room notes. So I'm going to jump into one that I've created earlier just to show you the common format that you might use. So here I've described this location as having plasterboard walls, wooden flooring, and timber doors. The way you write room notes is really up to you. But a lot of surveyors I speak to like to do it in a certain way. They would describe the different room elements, for example, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and so on. If that's how you do it, we do have an additional way that we can set up this template where each of those different room elements is listed individually, and then you select from a drop-down the material associated with that. So for example, for doors, you might have a drop-down that had timber or steel. Having the template set up in that way, I like to call it expanded room notes, does offer some advantages. So for example, if you're copying a room, if you found a similar but not identical room, you can just change one or two of those drop-downs depending on the different things that have changed. We do keep the flexibility of having some location notes too, so you can always put various catch-all things in there. Now you'll specifically have to ask us for this feature. We have a separate video on this if you want to check it out, so please go ahead and do that. But like I say, when we set up this template, generally speaking, we just have these simple room notes. Now I want to talk about one of the common mistakes people make when they first start using our system. Let's go ahead and we'll check out this inspection list again. Let's imagine we've added this item, which is some flooring. What some people might do is they'd scroll all the way at the bottom, filling this information in for this item, and then they'd scroll all the way back up, change this from item to location, and that's the mistake. When you select different options on the form, the fields underneath will reveal themselves to show what you need to enter. When I switch from item to location, I've hidden things like item, material, and so on because they're not relevant to a location. And the little warning message at the bottom is telling me that those things are going to be overwritten should I save this record. So if you made that mistake, if you filled in the form as an item, scrolled back to the top, changed it to a location, and hit save, you've just overwritten your item. You don't want to do that. Instead, what you need to do is to add a new record in the same place. I like to use the add item here shortcut to save some time. You can see we've got the same building, level, and location as before because that's the level that we're adding an item. This time I'm going to select location and I'm going to paste in some notes I've written earlier and hit save. So this is the pattern you want to see. You're going to have one location record for a specific location and then any number of items depending on how many samples you've taken and so on. So you can see here we have just a location. Now that might be valid. We might not have actually taken any samples or presumed any items in that second location in the hallway. But by adding the location notes, it is going to make the report look a bit more complete because we've shown the client we've been there. Now I want to show you how this will all appear on the report. Now I've skipped over to the report, and I've also added some images for those locations in the background, because they'll only appear at the end of the report in the details section if there's a photograph. So that's the reason I've done that. Now you can see on this inspected locations and items table, we have our location for the basement. This is the location notes we put in. And we've got a location for the hallway. And again, we put in the same notes, but you can see they're appearing here. We've also got these view links because we added those photographs, so it's going to show us that extra information. Let's click on the view link now, and here's our first location. The location notes are shown here, so you'll notice it has respected the line breaks, and they're going to show on separate lines here. Likewise for that second location, it's appearing in the same kind of way. Now I mentioned we have this extended room notes. If you were to have that enabled, you would see a bullet list for the different things like walls, ceiling and so on, and then the location notes just appear underneath those. So like I say, check out our separate video on that if you're interested. If you have any questions about room notes, please get in touch with our support team and we'll be happy to help.